We're here to make a new type of news.
New insights, new styles, and new topics every day.
We are News Generation.
Making news just for you. It's January 16th here in Seoul. I'm Shin, and you're watching News Generation. Joining me in the studio is Choi Ji-hee.
Good morning.
Good morning, and Im Sang-yeok.
Good morning.
Good morning. Now, both are here to speak on behalf of people in their 20s and 30s. As usual, let's start with our news feed, which covers different hashtags and news items that have been trending on social media over the past 24 hours. Our first story. There's many ways to move about here in Seoul. One popular method is using Darengi, Seoul's public bike rental service, also known as Seoul Bike. The rental service started in 2015 and has expanded so much that there's around 45,000 bikes available for use. But recently, Seoul City has found that the number of bikes that need to be fixed or thrown out is increasing. As of last year, 4,500 Seoul bikes were thrown out, while around 140,000 were repaired. Officials attributed this hike to more consumers leaving these rented bikes at random places rather than their actual return centers. And over in New York, a photo of a tourist riding through Central Park in a rickshaw with Japan's rising sun flag on it went viral. The flag was used decades back when Japan had imperialist motivations. That's why throughout the Asian continent, the flag symbolizes hostility and Japan's militarism. After coming across that picture, South Korea's history professor Seo Kyung-duk, who frequently highlights the need to get history saved, sent a protest email to officials in New York. The email read how it's intolerable to use a rising sun flag rickshaw in one of the world's most popular tourist destinations, as the flag reminds many Asian tourists of the horrors of Japan's war crimes. Lastly, although we're seeing birth rates drop year after year in Korea, the number of women in their 20s and 30s who are looking for YouTube videos on pregnancy and infertility treatment is on the rise. Experts analyze that this trend reflects the social atmosphere of women wanting to have children, but delaying it as much as they can to pursue their careers. That's why many also pointed to how more young women in Korea are looking into infertility treatment or egg freezing. According to a survey from Seoul City, the 1 out of 5 women who were planning to get pregnant last year had visited a fertility center. Other experts also highlighted how more women are comfortable looking for such information online rather than having open conversations with their colleagues or friends. Here in the studio, Sang-yeok, how did you read into this news story?
So, if my memory is correct, when I was getting the sex education back in the days when I was in high school, the teacher highlighted that giving birth and pregnancy is the most divine thing on this earth. And at the time, many students thought that having baby is a very smooth progress without much difficulty. But I think, first of all, it's a good sign that many young adults are paying attention to the procedure of having birth and the issue of infertility with the help of vlogs or other social media. And also, I think men should be more aware of this issues regarding giving birth and also the maternal health, because having a baby is an issue that conveys the efforts of both men and women.
Exactly. I totally agree. And I was quite happy to hear that a lot of millennials and Gen Z were looking for such content on YouTube, because it does show that even though we are a country with the lowest fertility rates in the world, we do still have that thought in the back of our heads as to wanting to have a baby. But it's just about that right timing. So what do you think about this story?
Well, I can really feel that this is now the new trend among young women these days. Many women choose to get married or have children as later as possible because, like you said, they want to pursue their career a lot longer, but still do want children. But since they will have to face pregnancy at a biologically older age, this could be a lot more riskier for themselves as well as the baby, which is why they're learning a lot about like pregnancy, or even turning to the option of freezing their eggs, or even looking for infertility treatment centers. So I think this is going to be the new norm going forward, because women aren't having children at a younger age or the average age that we used to see in the past, and it's going to get later. And treatments and medical practices that will suit these demands and the changing trend will have to improve going forward.
I do think it will propel. And also, while I was doing some research on this topic, I realized a lot of YouTube content had to do with one's personal journey of miscarriages as well, which does reflect that as our biological clock is going, the chances of having a healthy baby is also at risk. And before, I think a lot of people weren't really talking about this, but because our generation is interested in having open discussions on this topic, I think we are now seeing more YouTube content on that. Now, switching gears to our discussion topic of the day, you may have heard of the saying, a dog is a man's best friend. In a country where millions of households have pet dogs, many Koreans can probably relate to how sad and depressing it is to lose them. For some, it could even feel like bereaving a family member. That's why some people decide to clone their pet dogs. My AI voice secretary with more.
A few weeks back, a YouTuber with over 200,000 subscribers uploaded a controversial video called Our Puppy is Back. The video showed her journey of commissioning a company to create multiple clones of her late dog, Tico, who died years back in an accident. In the video, the YouTuber lauded how pet cloning helped her cope with the grief of losing pets. But it since stirred debate online on whether this is ethical or not.
So let's start our discussion with this controversial video that went viral. Chi, could you tell us a bit more about this YouTuber uploaded a video of her new pet clone dog?
Sure. So this whole debate on animal cloning has heated up, like you said, after a YouTuber with 200,000 subscribers posted a video saying her deceased dog had returned. Now, it was later revealed that the new dog was a clone with the exact same genetic traits as her original dog. And the YouTuber explained that after losing her dog in 2022 to a sudden accident, she suffered from severe depression due to her pet loss. And as a result, she decided to request a clone version of her dog. And according to the video, she commissioned a company to create multiple clones of her dog. And it also highlighted her satisfaction with the 2 clone dogs that she ended up with. And she also expressed her hope that the public would learn more about this pet cloning through her case, and mentioned that she wants to help others who are coping with the grief of losing beloved pets through this cloning method as well.
And I think you and I can really relate because we both have pet dogs and we know how precious they are, and they're really just an extension of our family. But at the same time, this video stirred a lot of controversy online. Why so?
Right, so there are many controversies going on, obviously, and most of the public sentiment reveals that cloning an animal is unethical. And when we think about the common sense, cloning is actually not a thing for the current present-day society. So a lot of people commented that the feeling of loss is actually an emotion stemming from the memory with your dog rather than the dog's appearance or the smell. So they say that cloning is rather selfish, solely based on the owner's decision. So let's say one of your close friends or a family member suddenly passed away. You wouldn't suddenly go to a hospital and apply for cloning, would you?
Right.
So in the same vein, people think that the sorrow of the loss should be resolved in different ways rather than just making a copycat.
And I think it also has to do with the ethical implications
Right.
that have to do with the issue. So why don't we look at that one? What are the ethical implications in regards to pet cloning?
Well, according to this Korea animal rights advocates, they've raised concerns about the lack of proper protection for animals used in the process of cloning. And they also note that at least 10 dogs are used to create just one cloned dog, which raises ethical concerns as well. And also the cloning process involves cutting a female dog's stomach to just collect eggs, which can be invasive and requires proper post-surgery as well as treatment transparency. And the ethical implications of using multiple animals to create one clone have also been raised as a significant concern, of course. And cloning involves modifying several animals, with one being selected, which is why the others have to be discarded and sacrificed as well. And additionally, under the current law, the Bioethics and Safety Act, which is the current law, only applies to human beings.
Right.
And although there are regulations on experiments with animals, cloning for commercial purposes, as seen in the YouTuber's case, is really outside the regulatory scope at the moment.
So because we're not seeing many regulations, there could be a chance of exploitation of innocent animals. And that's definitely an ethical question that we need to keep our eyes on. Are there any more?
Well, adding on to what Jiwi said, during the process of cloning and selecting the surrogate mother dog that will give the birth to the cloned puppies, numerous dogs have to undergo severe stress and abuse during the experiments, and also the cloning technology hasn't yet been perfectly performed and proven safe. There are studies showing that cloned dogs live shorter than normal dogs and will have to endure various diseases later on, like arthritis. So when a dog gives birth, from 5 to 6 puppies are born at the same time, like G said, and it's my wonder whether all those puppies will find the right owners. And the bottom line is the clone dog itself is not 100% same dog as the original one. So according to one animal protection group, although the DNA structure may be the same, the traits of the clone dogs can be different with the original one.
Exactly. Though it may look like your late dog, it might not have the same personality or the same cute habits that your beloved deceased dog used to have or pet used to have, which I do think does raise a lot of ethical questions given that the procedure doesn't sound the most ethical in my opinion. Now, I think people, especially from our generation, would have a lot to say about this topic, given that we are very pet friendly. From our generation, words like Petfam have appeared, which is the combination of the words pet and family, referring to how we view these cuddly creatures as an extension of our family. That's why we're now going to include a fellow Gen Z who's also considering whether pet cloning is the right way to go or not. Stay tuned for our live interview with another Gen Z from abroad who can actually give her own experiences as to whether pet cloning is the right way to go or not. Let's now talk to Hannah Kim, a Gen Z in the States who's very interested in pet cloning herself. Welcome, Hannah.
Hi.
All right, Hannah, so have you ever heard of pet cloning? Like, what do you think about it? Are you for or against this relatively ethically thorny issue?
Definitely have heard of it. I am familiar with some news stories where a woman has cloned her dog before. I personally am against it just because, as a lot of the reasons that you stated, you aren't really able to recapture the essence of the pet. It's not the same personality. And I think it makes it a more unnatural way of accepting loss, which is part of life as well. But in general, it almost feels like an imitation of your beloved pet. So I understand why people would want to do it, but I just personally am against it for those reasons.
Well, Hannah, do you think pet cloning is a healthy way to grieve the loss of your pet? What do you think about the surrounding ethical implications?
Definitely not. I do think in some ways you could say you're playing God by being able to rebirth your pet in that way. Ethically speaking, especially finding out that the procedure is pretty harmful or stress inducing for the animals, all for not even a guarantee that this is going to be the exact same pet. I just think it's putting both ultimately the owner and the pet through a lot of unnecessary stress in the long run. I've heard the quote that grief is all the unexpressed love with nowhere to go. And if you just bring it back to a cloned copy of an animal that looks like your beloved pet, it's not the same thing. And I think that does create another slew of difficulty being able to heal properly.
Right, Hannah, and before we go on to the last question, have you ever had a pet? Do you have a pet right now?
No, so I did have 2 pets. They were a Sheltie and a Golden Doodle, but they did pass a couple years ago.
I'm sorry to hear that. And as a fellow pet owner myself who's also waiting, because my pets are also getting older, I think you could relate to our last question, and Changyet will ask you that. Changyet, would you like to go in with that?
Sure. So then what do you think needs to be done to better help people smoothly process or grieve their late pets?
I think it's always going to be difficult, especially since, in this new day and age, a lot of people actually treat their pets as children, which is definitely the case in my household. And so I think the best way to handle grief is just Obviously, time might not heal all wounds, but it definitely helps. But keeping their memory alive. So whether that's talking to your family or friends about stories about your pets, just keeping their memory alive. I know I like to go through photos and videos basically every day. So do my parents, just to remind ourselves of what they look like, what they're like. Is definitely healthier because you remember the essence of them, not just what they look like, and they're not working as some template for a different animal to kind of replace. So I think that is healthier in the way that you kind of incorporate their memory in your daily life.
Exactly, Hannah. I think you mentioned a really good point there. It's not about imitating the appearance of your pet. That isn't going to bring your memories with your beloved deceased pet to come back to life. It's actually remembering the essence, and we'll keep that into heart. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure talking to you today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, but pet cloning isn't common in Korea, but it's actually more common in other parts of the world, like in the States where Hannah is just from. So Chi, could you walk us through some pet cloning procedures and what the costs are like in other parts of the world?
Sure. So pet cloning services for personal use to help overcome the grief of losing a pet started in the United States in 2015. There's a related service available in Texas, but it comes with a high cost of 50,000 US dollars. But then despite the high price, the demand for the service is high and people often have to wait for at least 6 months to receive it. And China also successfully delivered the country's first fully Chinese cloned kitten last November. But this wasn't the first, actually. China's first ever cloned cat was back in 2019 when the distraught owner had dug up the animal's body hours after it died for the cloning procedure. And it was performed for about 35,000 US dollars.
I see. What about in other parts of the world then?
Well, adding on to the US and China, if we turn our eyes to our country, Korea, Korea already initiated cloning animals several years ago. And the first replicated dog came to the world by a group of researchers in 2005. Later in 2017, another group of researchers succeeded in cloning the dog of the former Samsung Electronics president, Lee Gun-hee. By then, the dog had already been cloned 4 times, and this 4th version puppy was given to a civilian. Now, commercial pet cloning is being held in Korea, but it has been known that most of the clients are from abroad.
I see. So it is a relatively global concept,
Right.
and South Korea is catching up with the trend. And basically, I think it's because we are seeing a surge in demand. But as we mentioned before, this is a controversial issue, which is why I asked our global viewers to give their own opinions as to what they think about pet cloning. If you take a look at the screen, you can find out what 3 of them had to say. Let's start with Leon. Leon said, "I'm against pet cloning, as although it would offer comfort to grieving owners who have lost a beloved dog, there are alternative ways to cope with pet loss that are much more ethical." You Can Change Elias said, "Cloning only works on the body, not on the memory or soul. I see cloning as useful only for the preservation of endangered species, and a profitable business in cultures where the external appearance and packaging is more important than the content." And Core Diagram said, "Regardless of whether I am against this or support this, cloning cannot be outlawed at all levels. Hence, it should be banned in civilian sectors." Now, then why don't we wrap up our discussion as to hearing your final thoughts on pet cloning, and how would you guys like to see this issue develop from now on, especially since we aren't seeing the best of regulations when it comes to commercial pet cloning? Or would you guys like to see no more regulations in the sense that we want to see pet cloning be gone as a whole? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, although there are potential benefits of animal cloning technology, such as the conservation of endangered species, it's necessary to have regulations in place specifically targeting the commercial cloning of animals. Now, currently, cloning for personal or commercial reasons cannot be effectively regulated, and it's difficult to identify which laboratories are engaging in the practice. And so this lack of transparency makes it very difficult to ensure the safety of these procedures. And therefore, repairing the regulatory void in the country is very important. And in fact, Korea was the first to introduce animal cloning to the world back in 2005 when it successfully cloned an Afghan hound named Snoopy. And so I think it should also set an example to the world regarding these regulations as well.
And on that note, as a pet owner, you have Cherry,
I do.
our beloved cute dog who's turning 20, right?
Yes, she is.
What are your thoughts on pet cloning as a final note?
Well, I'm emotionally preparing for this inevitable moment when she will naturally have to leave us. But then I won't clone her or want to clone her because she was Cherry for once and she will never come back. And I just want to remember the memories, the experiences that I had with her, and that will never be replicated, even if I had a cloned version of her.
Exactly. What about you, Sang-yeok?
Well, for now, cloning pets seem to have more way to go, and there are more negative side effects rather than the goods that we can see from cloning pets. So if the technology improves further later in the future, then I think it would be a good news for the pet owners. But for now, I think pet cloning should be banned in Korea. And as for the government, I think they should also try to regulate these kind of facilities that treat the dogs for the purpose of cloning, because those dogs are exposed to abuses as well as other pet issues like discarding the dogs and cats onto the streets. And as for the pet owners, I think if you are suffering from a severe mental breakdown, why don't you receive psychiatric therapies or consultations? That would be much better than relying on unguaranteed cloning that may bring worse outcomes.
Because at the end of the day, I do think it's also about protecting animal rights.
Right.
If you claim yourself to be a healthy and good pet owner, you really need to consider the fact that animals have rights too. Now, in the meantime, we'll be here every day from 9:30 to 10 a.m. Korea time, bringing you more topics young people are talking about. Special thanks to Choi Ji-hee,
Thank you.
and Im Sang-yeok.
Thank you.
All right, thank you everyone for watching. We'll see you tomorrow. We are News Generation.